Howdy, y'all. Oh, wow, that's way too loud. Let's get me into the nice little yellas here. Okay. Um, I am, once again, Calder. We're going to be continuing on from our older modeling class. You can see it at the VODs. We're going to be going into how to do UV mapping, and we're going to do it with our nice, polite little Goku here. If you've been following along, this is the same Goku from before. But I added hair. I just kind of went in and made hair for whatever reason. I just wanted to see a full Goku. You don't need hair. I'm just going to be using the hair mostly to show off like very simple ways to add materials. But if you are looking for all of these materials, there's a link in the Discord, as well as I probably shouldn't drop it in the Dropbox. So just go to our Discord, go to #CCaveJam. And there's a link to my Dropbox with all of the UV class materials, which includes this Blender file, which includes these side and back profile pictures of Gokus. And additionally, some more pictures that we're actually going to be using to somewhat texture with right now. 1 second. I'm getting a call. It won't be too... Sorry for the delay, y'all. I just want to make sure that everything's okay. Alright, sorry about that, y'all. I'm one of those people that if people call me, I'll pretty much instinctively always answer just to make sure there's not an emergency. I think that's a virtue. I don't know. When people call, you get kind of spooked. You assume that people are dead or something. No one was dead, though. Everyone's alive. Anyways, as I was saying before, we had our old Gokus. If you want the Blender files and the textures and everything we're going to be using, you will probably need the textures. For this class, you want to completely follow along. Check out the CCaveJam channel in our Discord. It's all in the Dropbox file, all nice and neat and packed up for you. And if you want it, just grab it there. Now on to the next portion here. First things first, when you're UV mapping and stuff like that, essentially you are adding materials, but you're adding them in a far more precise manner. You are mapping your texture and your material and whatever thing the material looks like to specific portions of where your quads and polys and all these things are. But to do an even more basic thing before we kind of get towards that, I'm just going to basically show you how to assign materials within Blender, because for a lot of models, you might not even need to do any UV mapping, especially if they're just solid color models and things like that. So if you want to do that, literally select your object. In this case, I'm going to select my hair. You can select your Goku if you want. I figured the hair is just a good way to start. Go into this little panel over here. I'm going to start up here. And you see the little, it's almost like a world, but there's already another world. This little like checkerboard sphere, the material properties, go into here. And this is your sort of material box. And just pressing new, you'll see that a whole bunch of stuff comes up in here. We're not going to be going through all of this. This is like the shader properties of the material. There's a lot you could learn to here, and the more that you sort of mess around with stuff, the more that you'll kind of learn how all these things work and what they all mean. But for like the purposes of what we're doing today, I don't think that it's too immediately important for everyone to know this. So we're just going to do something simple here, and we're just going to make a quick thing. So we're going to go into our material. We're going to select hair BSDF, only because it is hair. We're going to go into here. We're going to select our property. We're going to go down to there. We're going to make it black. It already was black, but that's fine. Good. And our Goku now has black hair. Good. Okay. And that was as simple as that. It's all you have to do. Color, offset, roughness, all this sort of stuff. Not necessarily that important, but yeah, for certain surface things, literally you don't really have to do that much. Stuff like Toon, we'll do like slight different things. Usually what a Toon shader is like a ramp shader. That means that it takes light in, but reduces it to like 2 values. So if you ever heard of a cell shader, that's a Toon shader. It basically creates 2 sort of lighting values as opposed to a more like spaced out lighting value. It will basically make highlights and normal or low lights. That stuff probably makes more sense if you have an art background, highlights and lowlights. But to tell you the truth, Toon shaders aren't that hard and not that important to when you're rendering or doing texturing or UV mapping. I'm just sort of letting y'all know like what some of that stuff means. Anyways, now that we've got this hair here, it's pretty clear that the rest of this stuff is what we actually need to approach and actually need a UV map. And we're gonna first do a couple things in our workspace to sort of make everything make a lot more sense when we're UV mapping. Because you can UV map in just one thing, but like you're gonna want more things. So as we said in the last class, if you want more windows in Blender, find one of these corners, this corner or this corner, and just click in the corner and then pull in a direction, and you'll sort of have another window show up. And I saw this when I was looking up stuff to make sure that I knew what I was doing in Blender this time around. It's been a while since I've done it. Cool thing you can do is you can actually just sort of make an empty thing here, just so literally all you're kind of seeing is just your model and the stuff that's around there, which is fine. And we're going to be using this just to preview our texture. Instead of like this is the operation zone, so to speak. That's the results. And we're going to do one more, and we're going to pull up this time, and we're going to go and click this little space over here, and that's your workspace stuff. If you worked in Maya, usually that stuff is like a drop-down task menu. This like kind of goes into a whole bunch of different things that you can use. Some of these things are good for like full screen stuff, some of them are not. I'd say UV editor, for the most part, you kind of always want to be like a half thing here. And we're going to actually pull it up and make it a little bigger. I think it's probably more useful to have that around there than not. And we're going to select our thing here. What I actually did before this class was I already did some UV projections on here just to make sure everything was flush before we started. But this still has the same effect of being completely incomprehensible garbage, and what you're probably seeing on your screen is like a couple blocks, really, nothing that really makes any sense. That's okay, that's fine, that's like how things normally are when you do that. I think this is a conal projection, but even for that sake, doesn't matter. For the sake of this demonstration, we're going to mess this whole thing up really quick to show you how we can unmess it up. So we're going to go back to our material properties. Remember before, it's this little checkerboard sphere over here. We're going to make a new texture, and we're going to make it a super simple texture. We're going to do an emission texture, which basically just doesn't take any light values in, doesn't take any sort of special values beyond just your color or your text or emission. And we're going to go into image texture. You can load in anything you want in here in this image texture, but in order to teach UV mapping, I think it's important that you guys know about like the sort of basic stuff we're going to use. We're going to generate a color grid. If you want to generate a color grid, you do your image texture, you press new instead of open, then you generate type, and there's a couple things. There's blank, UV grid, and color grid. I like color grid more. I believe UV grid is just a checkerboard. Either way, we're going to select color board for the purposes of this specific tutorial, and we're going to press OK. And And what we can see now is Goku has this new, weird, fun suit of complete gibberish and strange signs. And that's essentially how that maps onto this image here. And we can kind of see that if we... Oh, whoopsie. Didn't mean to press scale there. Press tab, press A to select all. That's just where all of these maps, all of the vertices, now show up on this little graph. Essentially, we are taking the data from everything in here, simplifying it into coordinate map points here, and telling our program this is what we want to be overlapped on top of those vertex points. And from right here, that might seem a little obtuse. You might not really follow me. That's fine. In the next few steps, I'm hopefully going to be able to show you what that means in better detail. So, first things first, I'm going to show you how the easy and potentially best way to do this sort of stuff in Blender. It's not the same as in Maya, and it's the best, I should say, in quotes. This isn't like the best way to do it professionally. This might be the quickest way to do it. I'm going to go through all of the ways to do it first so you have an idea of what it does, and then I'm going to show you the one here that works. So, there's sphere projection. We press that. It splays out all of your vertices and all of your points as if you're putting it over a sphere. You can kind of see it over here, right? You can kind of see how that would match up in certain things. It also means that like this stuff actually gets a little bit more laid out in a proper direction. However, we can also see that there's like a serious cinch and seam right in his little butt right here that everything sort of warps to. Same with the head. There are weird warping properties. And it doesn't necessarily work that well. But this is like not bad for an auto unwrap. Essentially, we're telling Blender to kind of guess and try to unwrap this thing as if we were to project it upon a sphere, like a globe or something like that. If we do a cylinder, we can see similar results, but you know, this time they're kind of more rolled out, as if we took our Goku, put him on a rolling pin, and then sort of made his values from there. The difference here, of course, is that for some reason, I don't know why this UV stuff is scaling like this. Oh, I should totally have shown you that too. If you didn't see, I clicked a little arrow here, a lot like this arrow here, and it brought up all these normal tools you're probably used to. These are, of course, the same sort of tools you had before. They scale, they rotate, they do all of that. We're going to be using that extensively, but for right now, let's just like make this the size of our UV texture thing down here, so we get a better idea of what it looks like. If I'm going too fast, y'all, please let me know. I don't mean to leave anyone that does, but essentially, now we can see a little bit clearer like how this works, right? We can see that these are points that are being mapped onto these, like C4. If we look over here, or is that C4? 5, right? We can see C5 right here. We can see B5 right here. We can kind of see where they match up on points along the graph, and sort of how like this would map up well on an image, but it's also not perfect, and it might not even be ideal potentially for how we want to map our Goku. I'm going to go into our last one, and then I'm also going to come back to this later on. So once again, press A, UV, and we're going to do cube projection. And cube projection does a pretty decent job of like one-to-one. You can really kind of see it here, right? It's as if it would display this on a cube. It means that a lot of these things are actually pretty square with each other. Like we're not getting big size discrepancies between our UV generation map. Everything kind of looks flush. It doesn't look like anything's being shrunk or anything, right? Which is we don't want anything to be potentially bigger or larger or stretched. That's when it becomes really difficult to kind of draw or hand paint your textures. We'll get into that a little bit more later on. But essentially, if we want to sort of edit our thing and have it in a way that we can go in later on and really like assign what we have as special textures, this is kind of how we want things to be. We want everything to be about as to scale as our actual model here and not stretched out weirdly in other areas like our initial sphere projection. Alright, Now that we have that UV stuff in here, we can go into our UV editor, which is this window here, making sure once again that you guys are in UV editor on this in order to see all this, making sure that everything is selected here, because if we only select some, it's only going to select those portions. So if we press A, we see the whole dang thing. We're going to go in and we're going to do UV, and we're going to do pack islands. And we're actually going to have to do that while selecting everything. So pack islands. And what pack islands does is it takes all the things that were on top of each other and separates them into tinier little different unique things. I also have some special properties on here where they have a 0.010 margin that separates each one of these things separately from each other and then puts them a little bit further out. And what's good about this general thing is, let's say that we are going to, I don't know, we're going to have special textures for the pants specifically, right? Well, we can see right here that our pants are very much on display as a separate object that we can go in, and we can go in and make our little pants stuff in a different tool. We can go to Photoshop, make pants. We can literally draw pants, scan it, and then bring that texture in. But everything is sort of compartmentalized and packed away in the thing that actually sort of makes sense. However, we can also see here that there's some gaps, right? This isn't a normal leg texture per se. We wouldn't want something like this. We can even see it on the model, right? This is kind of strange. Like, if it wasn't there, if the opposite was true, right? This would probably be a better and easier texture to map. It is doing a fairly decent job of separating everything in a way that you could go back and then like realistically find the sort of coordinates that you want to edit and edit them by hand. But it's not necessarily doing it as ideal as we want to. We can then, and I think this is pretty cool, find ways to move everything around so that they make more sense in our own packing. And this is stuff that you really want to learn if you're working with other people, especially because you want to be able to ship this off to other people and not have like a really confusing workspace. I'm going to move this over here for now. It works like an artboard. It doesn't necessarily have to be attached to these parts in particular. It can just kind of go wherever. It doesn't have to be anywhere. And you can see up here that kind of when I move it around, right, it moves to different portions of the texture, right, and it changes the value there because we're mapping our UVs, our normals, so to speak. And let's actually, since I know that these, and I know this from before, I know that these pants portions are mapped to D4 and all that. They're right here, right? What we can do is, while retaining their size, let's zoom in a little so we don't mess up too much. Select all of this, move it down, and this is the back of the pants, so you can't see what's going on right here. Select all of this, move it down as well, and you can see it once again moving. And now, since we know these two are the thighs, we can select all of, oh, actually, we moved that a little too far, so let's put that just like right here. We can select all of this, move it here, and we can actually kind of see which pants that maps up to, right? We can kind of see where that's going to be. Rotate it, and sort of get it closer to where it would normally be. We can also see whether or not it's going to be matching up to the right part of the pants, kind of by following it here. So we can see that, yeah, B2, B2, these are actually fairly close together. And if we map it like this, we probably wouldn't have to really change that much of how our texture mapping is, and we would know exactly what portion, and we have a better UV map. So all of that is to say it's kind of like you're playing with paper dolls, but you're also you're taking these portions, you're saying this is where I want them to be, and setting them there, sort of like they would be dyed later on, like you would be dipping them into a dye. We're gonna mirror the x-axis. Sometimes this stuff just comes out weird. Don't worry about it. UVs are weird and crazy. Like, I have the utmost respect for people who are good at UVs. I don't particularly think I am. I think that this is definitely like one of my weakest points as a modeler. But it is worth learning and getting better at, because the better you get at it, the better your like final product for even stuff that isn't going to go into a game, even stuff you're just rendering, right? It'll look way better if you're good at UV mapping. Even if you bring it into Substance Painter, knowing how to unwrap a UV well can make a whole lot of difference when you're making high quality assets and you're not just putting like generic material shaders on stuff. Anyways, we can keep moving this stuff around and sort of sorting our things in a way that makes sense. But once again, I don't think that, since we're going through basically every type of UV mapping, we're not actually going to be using this. This is like maybe one of the quickest ways to do it, but it's not like the best way, and really like you should try out as many of these techniques as possible to find something that best fits your workflow, particularly if you're in a small team or if you're an indie team or if you're like the 3D generalist. You can learn the sort of proper practices to do this stuff, and it is very important to learn that, especially if you want to work with other people and other teams. But if you're doing something like, for our case, like a jam, sometimes you just want quick solutions. And so what we're going to do to have quick solutions is we're going to lock our perspective. Remember, that's Alt, like this. We're going to go into UV, project from view. Actually, we're going to have to do that again because I forgot to select it all. We're going to do UV, project from view, and we're going to notice that now our little Goku is just like this, right? And we can sort of select colors for him and do him in a very sort of simple way, which may not, you might think that that's not perfect. Goku usually has stuff in his front and his side. That's when we're actually going to start bringing in our fun textures and the stuff that we're going to do to manipulate how this looks initially. So we're going to go in from here. We're going to remove our untitled texture so it goes back to black. The UV grid is mostly just for, once again, figuring out where things should go. It's a guide for you. And you can even make your own UV grids. I've seen plenty of people do it. If you want to do like the hip new PS1 sort of aesthetic stuff, there are specific grids if you really want to make it look nice that are pixel grids. But for this specific case, what we're going to do is I'm going to add this Goku palette I made earlier. What this Goku palette is essentially the main component colors of our Goku here distilled into essentially just a horizontal color strip. And it looks like our UV actually kind of went a little silly. Let's just see if we can, once again, project from view. Good, that's better. And now we can see that Goku sort of has a position in here. If we want him to be all yellow, he can of course stay in here, but we don't want that, right? This is a decent thing to have, but it doesn't necessarily solve our problem of making Goku a different color for everything else. But since we have our UV already projected and how that works, what we can do now is we can select certain parts of our Goku. And let's just select these. We'll do the whole sort of transparency thing here. And we'll select both feet. Let's do both of them. Make sure the whole things are selected. Let's grab these. And make sure we got the whole feet, same on the both sides, right? Now, if we look into our UV map, we can see those tiny little boots in here, right? Well, we're just going to take them, and we're just going to shove them over this way. And what do you know? Goku's got some normal shoes again. So, we're going to go switch to our plane view now. We're going to do the same thing for his socks, right? And once we select these things in here, once again, we'll look down here, look at that, we got like what looks like a basic little sock here. We're going to put that, right? Slowly, Goku's starting to make shape. And I'm going to actually probably go through this whole thing because the point of teaching you how to do that, sorry for futzing around with this too much, is to show you how quickly things can get done if you do things in a certain manner, right? You don't always have time in jams, right? Jams are inherently sort of made so you don't have time to work on stuff. So let's find ways that we can cut out time and still have efficient and good-looking models. Which I would even say if you're learning how to model for the first time, or like you aren't a pro or you don't necessarily want to model all the time, it's a decent idea to learn how to do it this way, just so you don't have to waste time just kind of futzing around and making a perfect UV cut for a model that you might not even like totally care about, which is fine. You don't have to care about everything you make. There are plenty of castaway toys within my collection of modeling. And it looks like we got most of him here. We're just going to get as much as we can. If not, we'll be able to see pretty clearly the stuff that we neglected. You can also turn on symmetry for this, but in this case, I'm not gonna. And it looks like our pants are over here. And let's make sure that we get the right parts of his pants. We're actually doing it a little differently than the model because, you know, we didn't actually model his clothes in here. So Goku's gonna have a tucked in shirt for this, but you know, maybe it's a weighted training tucked in shirt, who knows. And we're just gonna scoot him over here. From here, we can select, if you press Alt and select something that's basically a loop, fun thing you can do in Blender, that just selects the whole loop sometimes, and we can move that over here. However, it doesn't always work, so it's kind of iffy. I recommend doing it for simple edge loops, but other times it can make things just a little more complex. And as I said, we don't love complex stuff. Oh, cool. I didn't want to do that. We just want to select faces. Faces will make it easier for us to select things that we want to select and harder for us to select things we don't want to select. So let's make sure we get all of our little spots here. In this case, I'm actually going to turn off that just so we can select a little easier and make sure we get the right things. And let's see if we get his little area underneath. Looks like we accidentally selected that. We don't need that. Didn't get it over here. And right here. Take one more look over just to make sure we didn't forget anything. Once again, we see it over here. Move that over here. Goku now has a proper shirt. You know what? Nah, we can't select that. So let's do our hands really quick. Sorry, this is getting a little tedious, but you know, I wanna show how quickly you can get a model UV'd and textured if you do like a more simple approach like this, using like gradient textures and simple flat colors. Maybe like the graphic design person in me that like also wants to say less is often more. You don't always need a hyper realistic or like super intricate model. Sometimes it just pays to, you know what? I bet if we press A and we do this, I get both arms. And I was right. Neat. Since we've done enough of the rest of this model, we can literally just drag the other parts around. And there is a relatively colored up, no eyeballs Goku. Sort of ready and fits the color scheme of what we want to do. He's not ideal. He's a little pale. He could definitely use some more time in the sun. But for the most part, it makes sense, it works, and it would be visible to those who probably actually know like the stuff we already talked about. This is the stuff that like in projection modeling that can be super effective. You can get things done fairly quickly, and you don't have to worry too much about how things work. So this could work really great for a lot of props, I would say. Like, let's say you want to do a can of something like this. Straight up, just throw it into here, do a projection view, put it on like a paint color, make the top white or something like that, and you can have your can done fairly quickly. It doesn't necessarily work well. There's a lot of, material textures and things like that, right? We're not getting detail, we're not getting folds. That could actually depend on your shader a little bit and on the detail of your model. If I actually detailed a lot of the ripples back here, I didn't do it in here, you might be able to get some of that sort of drop off, but you probably won't get the exact sort of cloth detail you want. Again, this is more of something you would do if you have basic models and you just sort of want to show off what things would look in a simplified color palette. With that said, I'm going to go on to my next way of showing ways you can potentially cheat out a decent model before we go into our last one here. So if you guys have downloaded the stuff from our CCave Jam Discord, you would see this Goku texture.png. And that's all of our Gokus together in this little space. You can kind of see it here. You got a front Goku, back Goku, etc., etc. What we're going to do this time, however, is we're once again going to project from view, but make sure we're locked in on front. We're going to make sure this is off, right? We don't want this on. Click out, grab it. We're going to go and make sure just to drag over it. Do not drag behind it. Do not have wireframe mode on. That's off. Drag over it. UV. Project from view. Okay. That gives us a Goku like this. And what we can do with a Goku like this is we can literally drag him over our little Goku texture here. And if his origin point was better, this would be easier, but you can start to give Goku an actual Goku face while not actually putting in the hard work of doing all that stuff. And there are limitations to this, right? If we zoom around on this guy, we'll see that he kind of looks like one of those inflatable blow up hit 'em dolls, like a little Bozo the Clown thing. That's fine because we're by no means locked into how these textures work. So if I move him down here and get him roughly in a position that he should be, we can just move this vertex by vertex. Let me make sure symmetry should be on. Sorry, sometimes this stuff is a little bit silly. I'm going to close this. See if I can get symmetry on. It doesn't look like it's coming up, so don't worry about it. Anyways, I move this, move these up, and sort of bring them in. And when we do that, wait, just make sure that this is flush on model. It looks like it is. Okay. We can kind of futz these values about to remap our UV to sort of make sense in the way that we want it to make sense. What you'll have in things like this is slight texture distortion. It might not map everything as appropriately as it should. That can be a problem if you are using lower res texturing or if there are super detailed, precise modeling. But for something like this that is relatively okay, you can kind of cheat out decent results just by making sure that everything sort of comes in and just is a part of this model. We can kind of see how that starts to work. I'm going to go sort of fast on this just so we can get a good idea of how this works. And I'm going to show you the other part of this. I'm not going to do the whole thing because I think you get the idea. But now his shoe looks a little bit more like the shoe we want. And none of this deforms your model. It literally this is it reading the data from your model. It doesn't manipulate your model in any way. It's just saying this is where I want portions of my model, if I were to put it on here, this is how I'd want it to map over something. You're like taking the fabric of what was your model and then draping it over something else, essentially, like a copy of it, and then projecting it onto this thing, which is pretty cool. And the shoes are looking a little funny. Like, ideally, you would have a Goku that isn't cross-armed here. I'm curious to see if this will function as well as I hope it does. And it looks like it might, which is cool. So, we can, make sure we grab these two down here. Let's rotate them so it fits a little better. And, like, not perfect. Definitely not perfect. Not like the exact thing you'd want, but not bad either. This is a decent way to cut corners, and cutting corners isn't a bad thing. You guys are jamming right now, presumably, so you should know that cutting corners isn't a terrible thing to do. So finding ways to do art faster, if it isn't perfect, that's okay, just as long as it sort of cuts the mustard. It cuts the mustard or muster. I don't know. Who cares? But you can get his little funny arm in there, and you're starting to get the point. I'm not gonna keep doing this for too long because I think I want to show you how the other end works. But yeah, doing that, we project it from one view, right? So his front is mostly okay. It's not perfect, as we said before, but it's mostly okay. We got a little happy Goku here. If we want to do the back, I'm gonna actually just get our back Goku out of here. Once again, Alt, get the back in here, make sure this is selected, click over here, UV, project from view, and we'll see that we also have our back view that we can just as easily bring into here and match up. Let's not do that. Make sure you always scale diagonally. What that does is it retains the proportionality of whatever you're scaling. If you scale horizontally or vertically, or even on the z-axis, I don't know what that would be called, width-wise, I guess, you risk essentially distorting how the original proportionality of your model is. So make sure that you always drag diagonally. Anyways, so doing it this way, we can actually, let me bring myself back to Goku here. Not perfect, again, and we're actually missing the sides here as well. Looks like these portions of him are fine. We can address that by, once again, projecting from view. It's funny, because when I did this before, I just used the back and actually came pretty close, to tell you the truth. But yeah, you get the idea, right? This stuff has a funny way of just sort of managing enough that you don't have to really mess around too much. Actually, let's do this. So UV, project from view. It might just be easier to do it this way. So it's what we were using when we were modeling anyway. So we're going to mirror X. We're going to make them bigger. We're going to bring them up. Just going to match them at the head, right around here. And we're going to make them smaller. And we're going to bring them back. And just roughly, so we don't see a lot of white space, we're going to do that. Okay. And for this side, we're going to do the same thing. Remember, Alt, and don't worry about side Goku here. We'll let him go away. UV, select this. Once again, UV, project from view. Same thing. Bring them over. Scale them up. And sort of match them up in a way that makes sense. If we want to make sure it's the same, we can literally press A again to see it all. But let's move into our Goku this time around. Sorry. And while his face is totally messed up, you can kind of see how it works and how he matches up. I would normally keep going from here and show you how to get the whole dang thing done, but we have probably the most important part of UV mapping after this, which you don't project from view. It's when you actually start cutting up your textures. What we're going to do before we even do that is we're going to just, once again, get rid of everything. We're going to generate a color grade again. We're going to select all our stuff and just even forget this even existed. So for my own sake, I'm just going to do a cylinder projection here. Doesn't really make any difference what you do. The cylinder projection I'm only using so I can get like a decent blocky thing to look at while I'm doing this. Just curious, let's see what happens if we pack islands here. Yeah, no difference. And now we're going to do what actual, professional best practice UV preparation is. And that is essentially making little paper dolls and cutting them up. So you're going to want to select your edge tool for this. And I'm going to start with the feet, and I hope this will give you guys a good idea of how this works. I'm going to select this whole edge here. And it might even be better to be in the wireframe mode when you do this. Okay. Select the edge. And again, if you want to select an edge, like an edge loop, press Alt when you click something. And see how that's like that? We're going to go into here and we're going to mark seam. And what a seam is essentially it tells the program when I proceed to cut up this UV that is a line that I specifically want cut. I'm going to turn this off. We don't need this for right now. We're going to now make another seam over here, 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 and here. And you don't need a seam this big all the time, but I definitely am going to do it this time just because I specifically want it to be there and I don't want anything else to happen. And what this means is if I were to separate this now, it has like specifically one axis is be able to be splayed out, and it would be splayed out in a way that like you could probably imagine that it would entirely be folded out like a box, like a pizza box, like if I were to take a pair of jeans and cut them along the middle and then along the pant legs, you'll see. So we're going to mark a seam here, and we're going to do all this. And there are always better ways to mark seams. I am not a seamstress. I'm sure anyone here who's ever like messed around and made clothes before, this isn't too different. You're finding seams and you're making them in a way that once you go into here, these are the parts that you will sew back together. So mark a seam. And when you do make seams, you're going to want to try your best to make them in discrete places. And by that, I mean you're going to want to make sure that wherever it goes, you don't want your seams to be in the most visible parts of our model. Seams can often be where parts of your textures are visibly sort of disjointed. It's where a lot of problems can happen. You can't really account for how seams often will act. So the best thing to do is to find areas that are discrete along your model and make seams there. It looks like this would be pretty discrete, right? We're not going to be able to see between the crotch of our Goku that much. Some of you perverts totally could, but our child Goku should not have his crotch looked at. Anyways, there's our little seam in here, and we have it in a way that wouldn't necessarily be visible. Depending on what character you make, it might be worthwhile making a seam in front or in the back. Like let's say this is a third-person character, and he has a lot of stuff on his front, a lot of gear or whatever. Maybe you'd make the seam in the front. For this case, we're going to make our seam in the back here and sort of make something that might not be as visible. I think for our game in particular, we will be using our Goku. Y'all are free to use these Gokus for whatever you want. Our Goku will be mostly seen from the front, so we're going to try to make our seams in ways that won't be immediately visible. So once again, bringing my seam up here, I'm going to end right here before his belt, and on his belt I'm going to do another alt-click, mark seam, and make something there. And now we have the pants all cut out. And we're going to keep doing this process pretty much until we have each one of our major areas seamed out. I'm going to turn off this again so we can get a little better look at this. I think what we want is this. So here, here. This is kind of our sleeves. There is, of course, like ways you can do this in less seams, and if you can do things in less seams, it's definitely worth doing it in less seams. Once again, seams can be pretty obvious at times, and things that you don't want like other people to see. Whoops, I didn't mean to do that. Let's say mark shap. No, we want mark seam. But if we can hide them effectively, it won't be that distracting, right? So less is more, as usual. Try to find ways to hide your seams, but if you can't, don't worry about it. Once again, this is a game jam. Time is of the essence. So mark a seam here again, and we got his arm seamed out. For his neckline, we're going to do another Alt-click. If it doesn't immediately select everything, don't worry. You can just go ahead and do it this way. It doesn't mean anything's wrong with your model. Just means sometimes the computer algorithm isn't that great at doing it. Whatever. It happens. This isn't Maya, and that's fine. So we could look along here. I'm just going to do a seam on his back. There might be a more discreet way to do it. Potentially we could go up his side here and make a seam. You can kind of share vert points on a seam, right? This might make more sense. So actually, let's just do that, right? This might be a better place for a seam to exist. We can hide portions of it underneath his arms over here, and it might create a more discrete seam while still creating essentially the same idea as us going up the back. Once again, we have these seams done. For our wrists, we might want specific textures for our hands. So I'm going to make seams right before our wrist, much like we did with the toes. Mark seam here. Mark seam here. And once again, how can we make it discreet? Unwrapping for the hands. Hands are a little bit trickier because you have to find exactly like what part of your hand would actually unwrap on both these things. I've done full hand unwrapping before. It can be difficult, and since both these things sort of end in columns, you kind of want to like end up making seams like this, just to make sure everything gets unwrapped properly and nothing sort of has overlays. Hands can be tricky. I'm not great with hands, and as I said before, like I know how to do UV unwrapping. I don't like doing UV unwrapping. I think it's I enjoy a lot of 3D modeling. I find it to be a truly sort of zen and enjoyable thing to do. But like, man, this is the part that I don't love. Keep making our seams on all of these models, and it's alright if you don't love it. Like, there are plugins to help with this. I have plugins to help with this. In our last game jam, we may use something called Sprytile, and that like just let you paint pixel art over things. You should look it up. Sprytile is really cool. But like, all of that is to say, like, you are by no means forced to enjoy or find this part wonderful. It ain't. It's just not. So let's make a seam here. Might as well see if like connecting this would work. I don't think this actually makes a lot of sense what I just did, so we're not going to do that. If we make a seam here though and a seam here though, I think that'll unwrap fine. It'll just be a little weird. Make sure to do the same thing on one side as you do on the other. Otherwise, it might be a little hard to find where all of your unwrapping goes. Speaking of, yeah, it looks like we did a different thing. If you want to clear a seam right underneath mark seam, mark seam, mark seam, and mark seam. Alright, that's most of our stuff here, but the next thing we're going to do is, first, move his hair out of the way. We're going to realize that when we make a model, and I showed you this in the last class, it's nice to have a whole head, but models don't need heads. As you can see by his hair, like that covered up a ton of it, right? So we're going to take out parts of his head that we're just probably never going to see and never use. So we're just going to plop, plop, plop. Goodbye. This is very normal. It seems weird, but like it's just not something that models use, is the back of their scalp. Usually there's hair, a hat, or something, right? Like you could never tell that he doesn't have that portion of his topology there. But it does help us when we're UV unwrapping, right? So going back into here, we're going to just, once again, make some quick seams. Not that one. Make sure you're using edge. Edge is always easier to make seams with. Looks like that. Select everything. You don't have to do it by the neck. I think it's easier. Anyways, make seam. Make seam. And since our head is actually not a cube, right? There's portions of it that doesn't exist. We can literally just make a seam here, and that would be everything we need to do. All right. We've made a lot of seams. Our guy has this fun little electric red, and actually from the front, you can almost not even tell that there's that many seams, right? There's going to be stuff in the neck that's hidden underneath. We can actually lift some of this clothing. We've hidden a lot of it, essentially. What we do now is we go to UV, and we just literally do unwrap. We do that after, of course, we select the thing. We do unwrap. And what we'll see is all of our stuff gets unwrapped by the seam now. And if we turn on our shader, we can see that it's actually to scale. You can see that it mostly follows a pattern, and it knows where it is. Nothing's kind of in a complete, like, willy-nilly weird space. And if it is, we can then look in here and see where we want things to be different, right? For the most part, it'll find like shapes and sort of link them together, which is very useful, right? You can still use stuff like pack islands and make sure that things like don't touch too much. For instance, I'm pretty sure that these are going to be our feet. Let's just check. Oh wait, they're not our feet. Which one? I think these are our hands maybe, huh? Yeah, these are our hands. So our hands are together. This is, I presume, our pants, right? All this stuff is in a place that actually makes sense now, and they're unwrapped in a way that we can kind of easily go back and add our texture properties to it and actually sort of hand paint and bring them in. The thing about this stuff, though, is it might be difficult to kind of do this without, you know, like, this doesn't mean a whole lot. What you can do is, for a lot of these things, in Maya specifically, you can just export your UV and your image here. I'm going to see if you can do that in Blender. To be honest, I kind of forgot to do this part. But that's all right. Edit externally. That's what you want. So press A, UV, image, edit externally. Oh. Image, path. So let's see if we have a path for the image. That might just literally be because whatever we just unwrapped here is not actually set to an image. It's set to this generic sort of path for the thing. I want to make sure that, yeah, these are armholes. You can kind of see that's where the other armhole, and it looks like since we made our other seam along the arm, that there's like a slight distortion here. It's okay. It's something we can mess with. With that said, if we decide to actually use a texture, and for this case, I think if we do this, we can make a fake user. Essentially, we can export this, and the less easy way, usually you would just use export image, but in the effort of time, we're just going to go into here, take a snip, copy it, don't worry about it, go into MS Paint, and paste it, and this is not, you know, the best way to do this, but we can now find the areas on here and one-to-one sort of paint and match things that would then, if we brought it in, show up. So let's think of some silly stuff to put in here. Usually you would already have the stuff grouped out. That's a shirt. Let's make a shirt blue for now. We'll just make it kind of big. I don't know. Well, scribbly lines on here. I don't want to waste everyone's time here doing this sort of stuff, but I want to basically show you like how this stuff works essentially. So we go in, make funny pictures, whatever. Usually you would also then delete this sort of stuff. You bring it into Photoshop and make sure that the UV sort of wrapping elements on here don't exist. What would happen if we brought this back in is the portionality that is like sort of orange and highlighted would just show up on here. But for the sake of just doing something quickly and showing you all how things work and you know, getting everyone done before bedtime here, we're just gonna sort of trace along, and you're gonna see some weird stuff when we go in just because essentially okay, whatever. We're gonna have all these little orange highlighted things on top of it. Anyways, we're gonna do that, and we're gonna give Goku a really messy, silly shirt. Let's just save it somewhere. Save PNG. We'll just put it into. Let's put it in my K drive real quick. Call it Goku shirt. We're gonna delete that image texture. Open. Go to our drive, wherever you may have done this. Goku shirt. We're gonna actually probably just scale this into where this was before. We can match it. We can just literally match it here. There's probably a more precise way. I wouldn't worry about it. Blink. Scale it in. And now we can see Goku's way cool new MS Paint shirt. And if we just match it on top of here, we're slowly getting there too. Let's bring it up. And now Goku has a really dumb shirt that actually sort of fits proportionally, right? That's how we hand paint textures, essentially. Normally, you know, you would take the thing out, you would just use the image there, you would put a second layer of what your selected overlay stuff is, but from here we can create one-to-one imagery that does match up well. In terms of getting this stuff to look pixel perfect, it takes a long time to get good at this sort of part. It's not easy to do texture mapping by any means. A lot of times it's why you see people do the gradient texture stuff I did earlier, because this stuff is a headache and a chore, and getting everything to function properly can be a real chore. People love using things like Substance Painter because it takes a lot of the guesswork and a lot of the difficulty out of this stuff, and that's fine too. Like there's no prize for spending 1,000 hours on something only for it not to be wonderful, you know? Try to work within your time frame when you do stuff like this. If you care a whole lot about your model, it's often very beneficial to do things the way I just did right here. If you care a whole lot about your model, but you're also okay with flat colors, the projective view stuff I did earlier was fine too. If you care a whole lot about your model, but you absolutely can't stand actually doing all this UV unwrapping stuff, especially if like you just want to save time, or your model is kind of specifically like normal or blockular, doing a UV cube unwrapping and then just doing the Pack Island stuff I showed earlier, that's totally valid too. That is to say, like, there really isn't a perfect or a best way to do everything. There's just a way to do everything. And that's why there are so many different ways to do UV unwrapping. You're gonna find whatever works best for you when you do this stuff, and then you're gonna work within it. I don't think that personally, like I think the best stuff you're gonna make for a game, specifically a game, not a render, not anything like that, but like when you're starting out and you're just making a game, starting out, and I'm definitely gonna highlight that. You're gonna have your best time, and you're probably gonna work most efficiently if you're not doing this whole process every time. If you can find a way to make things simpler for you, do it. Do it until you feel comfortable with the next step, and then do the next step. And once you can consistently do the next step, do the next step after that. It pays to do this stuff in the long term, especially in high fidelity stuff. But it also doesn't pay to sit there and be frustrated all day. And I'm only saying that because this is totally how I felt about UV unwrapping when I first did. I'm still not great at it, but I can at least do it sort of quickly and sort of to the point, and I understand it now. In terms of doing fun other stuff like normal maps and things like that, we're not going to be doing that right now. This is just a basic UV unwrapping course and a basic UV texturing course. But that is when other fun programs like Substance come into the fray and can really radically change your entire material process when you're working with models. And I think that might be a good through line for a lot of learning when you're making 3D models is, like, above all, just be nimble. It pays to learn, and it pays to try to find out things that can change your workflow, because you never know. There might be a special plugin that just, like, totally makes sense for you and lets you totally just make assets way quicker than you were doing before. And that's good. Like, there are best practices. That doesn't work for everyone, right? And look, modify, add subdivisions. It actually works pretty well. So let's if it still, like, maintains it within there. If you're using your low poly and your unwrapping, kind of cool. But, you know, be smart, use your time well, and if you get frustrated, it's fine. It'll be frustrating, and then it won't be frustrating. I'm not going to go too much further on this. I actually wonder if I have the other thing I was going to show you, because I did make a different Goku here. Oh yeah, no, this is just my UV mapping on this Goku from before. Funny enough, I could have just showed that. So yeah, same sort of stuff, different UV map, scaled a little bit differently. But, you know, it's still a process, it still works, and it's still a way to do this sort of stuff. And my greatest advice, once again, don't go crazy. Do the stuff that works and do it your best. Because, like, this still kind of works, right? Kind of once again show you, like, what I was showing you before, like this stuff, like, people would not be happy a lot of the time if you made a UV like this. But as I showed earlier, like, it's not bad. And if you were to make a quick asset for a game, you could do worse. So if we want to make the weird Shadow Goku I made before, we can go back here, get his feet mapped up. This is about right. We're just going to literally make him a little taller. And move him over. And bring him down. Okay, so here, make them a little shorter. Yeah, if y'all have any questions, I'm gonna pop into voice, and wait, yeah, just let me know what y'all are thinking. This is probably the wind down of the stream. I'm gonna do this silly stuff really quick because I was just amused about how well it worked. If you have any questions about like stuff you'd like to see in the future, if you'd like to see me do a more in-depth modeling thing, I could potentially try to do that within our last few weeks. But if you just want to chill out, make your Gokus better, or if you're not using a Goku, just make something better, this is a good time to do it. Funny thing is, I think I might be able to get this pretty quickly in here. So let's get these verts. Make sure that's not selected. And I think someone from like last class was asking how long I've been doing this, and I haven't actually been doing this that long. I maybe like started 3D modeling like a couple years ago, just dabbling in Maya because I found that I could have access to it for free. But I'd say in earnest and like actually going to school for it, I'm fairly new. It was sort of breaking the plane and learning the things that I could do faster that made me get better in a far shorter amount of time than I was progressing at initially. And that's kind of what you often will need, just the tricks. Like, I think one of the things I learned was you can totally just make models by extruding from a square all the time. And it usually actually creates models that always have quads, are easy to unwrap, and are often game ready and don't have problems with manifold geometry problems. We're not going to go into what that means. That's more of a renderer issue. But after learning like little tricks, I was able to go way faster, make things way better, and make them consistent, which helps. You'll always kind of learn tricks that speed things up. Let's move his shoulders in here and move him up. You'll also kind of learn, like, yeah, sometimes things are just done, and that's good. Yeah, there we go. Here's Shadow Goku. Shadow, what's his name? Ultimate Goku, because he got the white hair. It's kind of funny just looking at him this way, right? Like, because it's almost there, right? Like, the problems on these arms here we could actually fix. Let's see. If you bring these verts in a little closer, yeah, that looks way better, huh? And now, if we look at it, you know, if you didn't notice that he didn't have a face, Goku ain't bad this way. He ain't great, but he ain't bad. Let's see. Let's get the last of this in. I was so amused by like how well this worked when I was messing around with this earlier, like this project from view kind of stuff. To the point that I like wanted to implement it in some way over normal practices, just because I thought it would be like super fun just to cheat a little bit and do it this way. Because like to me that ain't too far off. There are problems to be sure, but like we could just as well import this into the other Goku texture thing, and that would probably be fine. It's an actual Goku hair, though, you know, to finish the whole deal. Mission. Oh yeah, he's got blue hair now. But no, he's gotta have Super Saiyan hair. There we go. That's the traditional Goku hair. And he's got a weird shadow face. And that's our Goku boy. Um, but if no one else has any questions or anything like that, or if anyone wants to show off their work, let me know. I know there's some people in the live streaming thing down there. I'll just be messing around in here, but always happy to take in some requests, chat, etc. Oh yeah, you can also just literally scale on here if things aren't like matching correctly. And since we're mostly just getting the same color here, that's all we care about. Why don't we just bring that up? Better hand, yeah. Kind of looks like an N64 model, like with these muddy textures right there. I don't know if the N64 will ever get its heyday in the indie highlighting model, and it's kind of a shame. I don't know. I think Dreamcast is the next on that list. And that'll be well deserved. But blink. I should also say, like, there are so many wonderful people on YouTube that will help with UV modeling now, UV mapping now, specifically for Blender. I had so much trouble because I decided when I was going to learn 3D modeling, I was going to learn Maya first, and everything was going to make sense because that's professional tools, right? That's where everyone uses, and that's the hard stuff, so that must be the good stuff. And to tell you the truth, man, the community around Blender is substantially more involved and easier to follow on Blender than it ever was when I tried to learn Maya. Just the amount of people you can talk to and sort of work with, just staggering. Like, it's really cool. It's really cool to see just how involved people are in helping people out and stuff like that. I think that's neat. Let's go up. I'm just curious if we do this. We bring in our Goku texture. Now we should have it. It's like mapped differently now, but we can probably just find the spot where it was. Shrink it back in again. Bring him here. Remember, we just want to get him roughly in the same spot. So, a little bit thicker, but not much. Okay, that's mostly there. Yeah, I'd say that's right. Okay, so we got that again. And now, instead, since this is his face, let's just only project from UV here. I like using the plane when I do this. And now UV, project from U. Yeah, there we go. Make his head a little smaller. And really, that's the problem with the model, that he has a sort of silly jaw here. Let's mend this a little bit. Bring it up. Bring these up. Yeah, it ain't perfect, but it ain't bad either. Alright, let's give him good old black hair. There's our silly Goku. Having a good time. And that was our wonderful little UV mapping experience. We're already going for an hour and 30 minutes, but thanks for watching, y'all. Thanks for attending, some of y'all. And let me know if there's anything else you want to learn about UV mapping. As I said, not the biggest expert in it, but I can at least help. And I can give y'all some resources. Just bother me in the chat at CrawlDoor on the Discord. In the meantime, thanks for coming, y'all, and good night. Let me put on the dish.